Hello and welcome to the No Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McDonald, with me co-host Sheldon Kaufman. Today we continue the NBA preseason show where we predict the season for every team. We give them their own episode where we predict what's coming up from the season and we talk about their offseason that's gotten them to the point that they currently are at. Today we have the Phoenix Suns, second to last episode for the teams at least. Following this, we do have a full Western Conference predictions episode coming forward. That's enough with announcements. Sheldon, I'll give you the floor. Any interesting Suns things that you want to point out before we start this episode?
Um, I'll just say one word to sum up the Suns, and that's money.
Yeah,
Highest payroll this year, and I mean we mentioned it a little bit. I'll go ahead and say it now, but Beal, Booker, and Durant are taking up 105% of the cap. This is a championship or bust team. Let's talk about what happened last year, Pat.
yeah, it's actually a little bit, it's actually closer to 102 because Durant and Beal are allowed to make over the 35% because there's a weird rule where if you sign your deal, you can either take uh, an increase up to 35% or 8% based off of your last salary. It would make them more money if they take the 8%, is basically what happened. So they're actually 107% of the salary cap. Um, that's a lot. Anyway, last season was the first season, uh, full season with Durant. They traded Chris Paul for Bradley Beal, pretty much straight up. There was other stuff, second round picks thrown in there. Uh, Weird stuff with player Bradley Beal forcing his way to Phoenix, basically. Either way, this was the first year of the three players of the same font, but on different font sizes experiment. The result 49 and 33, sixth in the Western Conference. First round exit to Minnesota. Their expected record was perfectly in line, 49 and 33. At home, they were 25 and 17. On the road, they were 24, and it shouldn't say 17. I believe it should say it should be 25 and 16 at home, and then 24 and 17 on the road. Pre All Star break, 33 and 22. And then post All Star break 16 and 11, so they did play a little bit better down the stretch. I came with more good health and some, figuring some stuff out with lineups later in the year for Frank Vogel. And then in the East against the Eastern Conference, they were 20 and 10, so they dominated the Eastern Conference. And then versus the Western Conference, 29 and 23, so still very solid, but not as dominant. In clutch games, which was half of their games, which is one of the higher marks in the NBA, they were 20 and 21. So, yeah, that is the Phoenix Suns based off of their wins. Any comments on that before we get into their stats?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we only got to see this great trio play 41 games together, which was, I think, kind of maybe tweak the record stuff a little bit, but um, also as you said, they did get healthy together as a unit near down that stretch of the season, and that's why they ended up uh, performing so well. I think that it's a good look going into 2025, 2026 season or 2024, 2025 season. It was very unfortunate what happened in the playoffs. I don't think anybody was expecting a 4-0 sweep from the Timberwolves, but you just got to give credit to Minnesota. Uh, they obviously had the Suns figured out.
Yeah, it really just felt like a passing of the torch moment. I think specifically because Anthony Edwards, his idol was Kevin Durant, which is interesting because they have very little similarities in their playing style. Either way, it was not the way the Suns wanted to go out last season, especially with this being the first increment of the experiment with this super team, as people like to call it. Getting into their stats, plus 3.1 net rating last season, which was ninth in the NBA. Offensively, they were 10th in offensive rating at 116.8. And then defensively, they were 113.7 defensive rating for 13th. So just shy of the trademark top 10 offense, top 10 defense, who are a true contender. They're a little bit shy there defensively. And it's worth saying their offense wasn't, you know, there by a long shot. I want to ask this before we keep going. Do you think this was higher or lower than you expected for their offense?
What was it? 10th?
10th.
Honestly, I'm gonna say lower.
Yeah. I
Beal. I mean, like, especially what Beal had been doing in Washington for so long. I don't know what. I'm sure he put up a great year right before he left. And just what KD is and how consistent Booker and KD have been for so long. I mean, I think we were expecting. I thought the Suns were unbeatable. To be honest, once I heard, I thought they were going to be unbeatable. So yeah, definitely a little bit lower than I thought.
Yeah, and some of that I expected them to be a very good team, but uh, have their deficiencies, which they did. But their offense also just wasn't as impressive as we thought it was going to be going into the season. Even with having the season passed, I thought they were even a little bit higher than 10th, even though I knew they weren't breaking barriers with their offense. Talking about their offense more, first in transition offense, this is primarily because of their great shot making. Even around their top three guys, they had a lot of good, individual, either they were very athletic guys who could finish in transition at the rim, or they had really good shooters who they could kick the ball out to in transition. Very good stuff. Pick and roll ball handler efficiency ranked first with 27th frequency, 100th percentile. So they were very, very good at this point of offense. They have those three guys. Those three guys run a good bit of pick and rolls together. You mix that with a good screener in Nurkic, it's going to get you some very good results. And the frequency isn't super high. For them, generally they can kick it up a little bit because their points per possession was a little over 1.1, which is a very, very good half-court offensive number. So they could have even pushed that frequency a little bit higher. 23rd in roll efficiency with 23rd frequency, 24th percentile. Here, they didn't really get enough out of their bigs here. And that could be a large reason why they didn't run a ton of pick and rolls. Although they were getting good screens out of Nurkic, that was about it as far as value they could bring. Their bigs were really pop guys or great roll threats. So they were missing a good bit here offensively for them, but they had the three guys to pick it up and make some shots for them. 23rd in post efficiency, 10th frequency, so they actually did run a good bit of post ups. Durant, Booker sneakily do take a good bit of post ups. Maybe not sneakily. I think people really do know that about them. It gets them in their mid range area where they like to cook. I would say these post ups, they seem very inefficient. It's because a lot of them are ending up with jump shots versus a lot of other teams. Their post ups are ending up in only layups. If they're taking jump shots out of the post, they just don't do them. Right. Phoenix consistently went to these, and it was pretty good for them, but maybe you could have argued that the pick and roll could have been something they ran into a little bit more. 12th in isolation efficiency, 8th frequency, 62nd percentile. You had mentioned before the show you were interested to see where they ranked. Where did that stack up?
Top 10. I'm not surprised in frequency. 12th in efficiency, a little bit lower than I would think. I would think they could be top 10 in that maybe, but I'm not. I'm happy with those. Those are kind of the numbers I was looking for. Yeah. Those are good.
Outside of the Clippers and the Mavericks, I think they are the only really top 10 frequency team that had decent efficiency numbers. I could be missing a team there, but generally the teams that run it a ton don't have as great efficiency. But they were all overall a pretty solid efficiency team. Realistically, you want that frequency to be lower because they're just less efficient shots, but it's hard to argue with the guys they had running it. So, that's that. And Frank Vogel, we'll talk about him in the same section, even though he's no longer the coach. But either way, we'll talk about him. Offensive rebounding are 9th, 5th in 3-point percentage, so very solid, but 25th in attempts. This primarily comes from their guys running the show here. When they're helping the team, it's really good, but none of those guys take a lot of threes at all. Um, and yeah, we'll talk about it later in the episode, specifically about one of them. Um, they probably need to increase their three-point attempts between the three of them because they're all pretty solid shooters. Pull-up threes, they were also fifth, I believe. They were either fourth or fifth. I'll pull it up, and then they were 25th in pull-up attempts. So they were very efficient doing these pull-up attempts. Didn't run a ton of them. I'll let you get any offensive notes that you want here for a second before we get into their defense.
I mean, yeah, all of those numbers make sense. Like we kind of talk about, I think what we're alluding to, what we're going to talk about in the scheme talk is that those three guys are a huge part of this offense, and it's nowhere near the numbers it is without them. So
Yeah,
that it is interesting though that they weren't taking them out a bunch of threes, considering the guys they have like Grayson Allen, Beal, Eric Gordon can still shoot it from three really well.
yeah, they were actually
that's
third.
a little surprising.
Yeah, third in pull-up attempts. So
wow, yeah, that's weird.
Or in pull-up three-point attempt percentage. In attempts, they were 25th, right?
Yeah,
still not taking a ton of them. Going forward to their defense, like I said, 13th ranked team overall, but in the transition, they were 8th ranked. Very solid. Vogel historically has had good defenses. Honestly, I think he maximized the defense out of this team that he could have. I think he did a really good job. Pick and roll ball handler defense, they were 23rd, so that's not very good. I don't think they had very good individual defenders. None of their top three guys get the rep as that, and they had to play a lot together at the end of games.
Yep.
14th in frequency with ball handlers, 24th percentile. Just, not perfect, obviously. Their personnel, I don't think, was great. I think a lot of the time, guys being in and out of lineups really affects your ability to defend as a team. That shows up a lot in the pick and roll versus isolation, where it shows up a little bit less because it's one-on-one most of the time. Roll defense was 8th, 76th percentile, 12th frequency. This is hurting them. They were giving up a ton of roll points at the rim, and the efficiency for the defense, for the offensive teams, was pretty good at them. It's a size thing. We'll talk about that in a second. 10th in post defense, 69th percentile. 4th in our 14th frequency. Let me touch on this. I forgot to mention. They were good at preventing rim attempts in the pick and roll, but they weren't good at stopping you from taking the attempts. So they were giving up a ton of attempts. But they were decent at stopping them. I misspoke there. Post defense, like I said, 10th with 14th frequency. Overall, pretty basic. We'll get into the scheme and why this is, but teams when they run these smaller lineups that the Suns run, it makes you kind of want to post up with the guards instead of with the bigs. It kind of leads to a little bit better post defense efficiency for the Suns. Similarly to why their post efficiency on offense was a little bit lower because they're resulting in jump shots a lot. Isolation defense, they actually ranked 4th with 10th highest frequency, 90th percentile. This one really surprised me because I don't really think they had the individual defenders. Watching the film, I couldn't really give an exact reason to why they did this. Why they outperformed what you would think their defensive players look like. It really is just like when these guys are put into one-on-one situations, it seems like they just try a little bit harder. Other than that, I have not too much else here. 20th in defensive rebounding, giving up a little bit more points than you would like, but other than that, that's all I have on their defense. Do you have any defensive comments? Transition scheme time.
I don't have too much. What I did notice is that they like to go with Nurkic in the drop. He's not mobile enough to really do anything else, and they're all guards out there, so they pretty much switch. They switch 1 through 4, and yeah, teams love to post up against them. And
this season, it felt at the end of the year when they really went on a run. They unlocked Kevin Durant as a help defender, which is where he's historically, that's been the way he's brought value on defense. Um, the real driving force of their defense, we'll get into it later, it was Nurkic. He's kind of like a really interesting defensive playmaker. You mentioned it with the drop. He's not very good outside of the drop. Like truth be told, he's really bad outside of the drop. But if they know that they can exclusively play the drop with him, um, then they can get some good results. And they actually did go to small ball a good bit with Durant at the 5 and
Oh,
just
okay,
switching everything. So
yeah,
when they did it a little bit with Eubanks, I think you're going to mention him. They would switch
yeah,
him a little bit more than Nurkic, but Durant at the 5 was a good way for them to switch everything um, and not sacrifice, too much rim protection because, in a switching scheme, Nurkic, like, he gets killed.
yeah,
Because he needs to be parked around the rim to make plays around the rim. Durant can range over a little bit more. Nurkic isn't like a Jarrett Allen or a Wembanyama where he can just recover really quickly. Like, he has to be there. But when they did that, he was pretty good at it. Any offensive scheme talk with them?
yeah. They like to let the stars run the show. That's for sure. When I noticed is when Nurkic was in the game, it would be either Beal and Nurkic or uh, Booker and Nurkic or Durant and Nurkic, kind of playing a 2-man game while the others kind of sat and watched. And they would kick out, and then everyone would make their play. Uh, Usually, they would kick to Grayson Allen or Eric Gordon for a 3, and then if it was kicked to Beal or Booker, then Booker or Beal would just go get a tough shot, tough bucket, like they usually do. And then when they went small ball, they kind of tended to go ISO a little bit. I kind of saw they didn't really go with the pick and roll when Nurkic
Yeah,
is out
5
of the
out a
game.
little bit more.
Yep, yeah. So and they would just let that because like we talked about, they have they have 3 elite ISO players in Booker, Beal, and Durant. So I mean, that's why they had the frequency. That's why the frequency was so high, and that's why that's kind of the identity of this offense is just let the stars run the show.
And then a couple more notes here. They like to play a lot of small ball. We mentioned it. Some of that was with Durant at the 5. A lot of the time, it would be one big with either Nurkic or Eubanks. For them, they do like to play 3 guards, like a lot. Usually Beal, Booker, Grayson Allen, or Beal, Booker, Eric Gordon. Um, or, Booker and Beal missed a bunch of time. One of them with those other 2 guys. That's generally what they like to do. Later in the season, they traded for Royce O'Neal. They played him a little bit more. Once they traded for Royce O'Neal, they like to play him a little bit more than those 3 guards. But a lot of it was Grayson Allen shot the ball so damn well last season that they couldn't take him off the starting lineup. Otherwise, their change up to 3 guards was a wing. If they are doing a wing, it was Okogie, he's technically a wing with how he plays on defense, but he's still 6'4". Royce O'Neal, like I mentioned, he's a 6'6" wing. Nasir Little, it didn't work out with him, but he's a taller wing. And then Keita Bates-Diop, again, before they traded him for Royce O'Neal to get a guy who they felt they could start, it was Keita Bates-Diop as well, too. Stuff like that. They did do a little bit of Bol also out there at the 4. It didn't work, but we'll just move past that. Last season, they obviously were operating with Frank Vogel as their head coach. If you know Franco Vogel from his Indiana days or his LA Lakers days where he won a ring, it's the same guy. Obviously, they've moved on. They've brought in Mike Budenholzer, former Atlanta Hawks and Milwaukee Bucks coach. He did run a lot of too big in Milwaukee when even some people thought he shouldn't. A lot of people thought they should have transitioned to Giannis at center. He kind of stayed packed on Brook Lopez going to play out there for us, and we're going to have Giannis out there for the extra big. I don't know how this is going to transition to Phoenix, especially with some of their moves they made this offseason. But that'll mean, to me at least, that Nurkic will still be playing a good bit for them in a drop coverage, obviously, because mobility-wise, him and Brook are very similar. Other than that, if you're done with scheme, we can move forward to the offseason.
Yeah, let's go into it.
All right, so the draft, they had 2 draft picks, Ryan Dunn, Oso Ighodaro. I'll just touch on Ryan Dunn because he's a very simple prospect to cover. He's one of the best defensive players in the draft, straight up. Great perimeter defender. He's actually a really good help defender, too, at the wing. Great on ball. The offense kind of sucks, right? That's, in college it was fine, but it's really hard to project him to an NBA role. The comp, I think, always for him is Batista. If you had any Ryan Dunn, yeah.
Well, just to piggyback off of you, he needs someone else to create a shot for him. Like a lot of his strength on offense was cutting off the weak side, and that's how he would score a lot of his buckets. Just can't really shoot the 3 ball that well, but just really good defender. Let's not take that away from him.
Yeah, fantastic defensively. It's really hard to project his offensive game going forward. And for Suns fans, they feel like, hey, we've seen this guy who is a defensive guy who we don't think is going to shoot, and he's a great cutter and has great feel for the game. With Mikal Bridges, who eventually developed into being a pretty solid shooter. The indicators for Ryan Dunn are just simply not as good. Did you get his 3-point numbers?
Yeah, it's 20% from the 3-point. It's not very good.
Yeah, 24% from 3-point line, and then 50% from the 3-point line or the free throw line as well. So, just it's very hard to project him to be an NBA shooter. But defensively, he should be very good for that. Do you have any Ryan Dunn, or do you want to go to Oso?
No, I think we pretty much touched on everything that he is.
He's a very fun prospect, but there's not much to talk about with him because his archetype is so set, right, of what he is as a prospect. Maybe he will make an impact for Phoenix right away, too. It's worth saying. So what do you have on Oso?
Oh, yeah. Oso Ighodaro, 6'10", 6'11", 222, 6'11" wingspan. He played at Marquette last year. 13.4 points per game, 6.9 rebounds, 57% from the field. Let's get into what he's good at. Really good kind of mid game. I wouldn't say mid range, but he has a very good floater and really nice push shot. I don't know if we have any push shot fans on the channel, but really nice push shot.
As a Knicks fan, Isaiah Hartenstein has made me.
Yeah, so really good touch in the lane. He's also a really good roller. He's very good in the pick and roll game. He can finish at the rim, finish through contact, and he's actually a pretty good passer. Off the dribble and just in the mid post as well. Sneaky good passer. He had 2.9 assists last year. Not too bad for a big man. The improvements, his 3-point shots, I don't even think I think it was 0% because I didn't even write it down. So he doesn't have a 3-point shot. His rim protection is a little bit iffy. He is tall. He does have a decent wingspan, but he kind of can get bullied by bigger, stronger centers. And the rebounding numbers could be a little bit better.
Yeah, this is a guy who, in previous seasons, he had actually been a lot more efficient than he was. Some of that is a simplified role previously, but his junior season, he was actually even more efficient than he was this past season. His passing's the big thing for me. And his 2 seasons ago in his junior year, 19% assist rate to a 15% turnover rate. That doesn't sound that great because typically you want to be in that like 2010 thresh mark or that 30-15 area. Either way, a lot of his turnovers are going to be off of stuff that bigs do. They're not necessarily passing turnovers. A lot of bigs have a lot more just overall scoring turnovers because of less ball handling. But as a passer, he was a pretty solid passer. And then it got, his assist percentage went down a little bit, but he limited turnovers a little bit this past season. I do like him as a passer. In that intermediate game, he's pretty solid. Like you said, rim protection. If he was a better rim protector, he would be going in the first round. A little bit undersized. I think you said 6'10", 6'11". I've seen him 6'9".
I saw 6'9" without shoes, so that's why I threw on the 6'10".
Maybe college does it different. Yeah, I also saw him at 205 pounds, which is, a little frail for the NBA.
Yeah, that would definitely make sense why his rim protection is very weak then. So, my apologies on that.
Decent athlete as well. I'll put that out there. He did seem like at least an above average mobility guy at the big position. Any other comments on those two guys? Yeah, they're very solid prospects.
Yeah.
But it's hard for us to write a whole 5-minute segment on these guys because they're good, and typically what their roles should be in the NBA. Going forward to the rest of their offseason, Jalen Bridges, UDFA, he was one of the higher ranked UDFAs. Solid player, he's a wing size player. We'll see what comes out of him, but whatever you can get out of a UDFA. Mamadi Diakite played for the Knicks this past season. Similar to Oso, slightly undersized center. I think Oso might be a little bit better, honestly, but it's a big sized player, not bad to have. Colin Gillespie, bench filler guy for Denver the past couple seasons. Monte Morris from Minnesota, really interesting point guard. He can do a lot of things for you out there. Monte Morris is a good signing. We'll get into why that's a really good signing in a second. Frank Kaminsky and Miles Plumlee, they bring in to shore up their big depth. I think that's a great move for them, considering the big play that they got in the role. Specifically, I think Plumlee can really help them in the pick and roll game. Ty Washington, just a guy who hasn't found his footing in the NBA yet. And then the big one for them, Tyus Jones, they sign, just like all of these guys on minimum contracts. Tyus Jones, they get on a minimum contract. Was a guy who I believe had a much bigger offer from the Knicks, but Tyus Jones took the offer to come to Phoenix to start. So, any comments on those additions?
I actually do really like the Mason Plumlee pick. He played on the Nuggets last year, right? Or the Clippers? Clippers, yeah. He had a really nice role with the Clippers. 5 rebounds a game. Really good rebounder. 5 rebounds a game when you're playing behind Embiid. Or, no. Fuck. He wasn't on the 76ers. Zubac, yeah. 5 rebounds per game when you're playing behind Zubac is not too bad. He's also a really good screen setter. I think he's one of the better backup bigs in the NBA. He's pretty solid. And the Tyus Jones one I think is really big for them, especially being a Wizards fan. I watched a lot of him, or actually I didn't watch many games last year, but he was one of our best players on the team last year. Really good playmaker. 7.3 assists last year. Just really good stuff. He has good ball security as well. 1 turnover last year, and I think throughout his whole career, it's never been over 1 turnover a game. So really good.
He might be the all-time leader in assist to turnover ratio.
Yeah.
This guy. We'll talk about it in a second. They needed this. They needed this.
Yeah, this is someone they need, especially just with the makeup of the team. Getting a guy like this, and a guy that definitely could win for a lot more.
Too.
Yeah, Monte Morris, yes, but I think Tyus Jones is way better than Monte Morris, and the fact that they got him on a minimum is a huge steal for the Suns. Like a really big steal. And I don't know if people are talking about this like they should, but I think this is one of the more underrated signings. So I think they actually had a really good offseason, Patrick.
I do. I like with these teams, like we mentioned, 107% of the salary cap to those guys. Typically, we've seen it with other teams that go over with all of their core players. They've had their depth already on the roster when they go into these three max players, and then so they don't have to look and fill out the rest of their rotation with minimum contract players. The Suns, however, they didn't already have those rotation players under contract, so then to fill out their rotation, they had to make it up of minimum contract players. So that's why it took an extra season for them to really fill out this depth, because a lot of people, it was going to take this extra off season to really fill out an NBA rotation. And then, you have guys taking minimums like Monte Morris and Tyus Jones, who are probably a little bit better than a minimum. Not to mention, like Gary Trent Jr., if they would have brought him in too, that would have been another guy, right? But he went to Milwaukee to start there. They can't promise all these guys to start.
Yep.
Other stuff, Royce O'Neal extension, they got that done. $42 million over 4 seasons, roughly 7% of the salary cap for the next couple years. They also extended Bol Bol and Josh Okogie. Neither of those were super big deals. Bol Bol on a minimum deal, and then Okogie did get a little bit more. Not as much as Royce O'Neal. He got 16 over 2, which is 5% of the cap. Solid re-signs, I think. Not much else than that, unless you have any big comments on those. We'll go forward.
No, I mean, I think everyone always wants Bol Bol to get more playing time, but so it's nice to see that he got re-signed.
Yeah. Losses, Udoka Azubuike, they lose him. He wasn't a big piece for them. They lose Drew Eubanks. He was their backup center last season. It's fine. I think bringing in Plumlee and Kaminsky. Plumlee, I think, is a little bit better than Eubanks, and Kaminsky, I think, is maybe a little bit worse than Eubanks, but I think you perfectly addressed that depth that you lost there. Losing Eric Gordon, it's, Eric Gordon, he hit some shots for them last season. He was a good shooter. That was about it. It felt like it's notable, and I will say they might miss Eric Gordon a little bit, but it's not a huge loss for them. Saban Lee, he fill out the roster type of guy. Was kind of interesting for Detroit a while ago. Nasir Little, they ended up waiving him. It saved them a little bit of money. He's gone. David Roddy, he was a trade deadline guy for them last year. They ended up sending him to Atlanta. Isaiah Thomas, he was on a 10-day contract. Everybody knows Isaiah Thomas. And then Ish Wainwright.
Oh, they were legend. They were legend.
Forgot about him later. Yeah. Ish Wainwright, he got some minutes on Phoenix last year. It was really because they were super thin. And then Thaddeus Young, I actually didn't know was on Phoenix last season, but he's gone. It's been a couple years since he was a really great player. He was pretty solid at Chicago. And he does have that one list where he's up there with LeBron, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan.
You said Tony Snell or who?
Thaddeus Young.
Thaddeus Young. Okay.
Yeah. Unless you have any comments on any of those losses, we'll go forward to lineup data. Okay. So.
Now let's get into that lineup data.
From their team last season, who do you think was the biggest impact for their defense?
Let's go Nurkic.
It was Nurk. A lot of that is I like Eubanks as a player, but he's not the stationary rim protector that Nurkic is. Even if I think Nurkic is like B- tier in that category, Eubanks is C- in that category. Overall, between their three guys, who do you think was most important for their offense?
Devin Booker.
Devin Booker. This is
Dang.
Yeah.
2 for
It was
2?
Yeah, on fire. So last season, Booker and Durant, I don't think many people thought it would be Beal. Either way, between the two, they had the same usage rate, meaning possessions ending with them scoring or assisting, or attempting an assist or attempting to score. With that, Booker had a 9% higher assist rate, which is, a good bit higher, and then a 3% lower turnover rate. Booker was just so much better of a passer, and although KD had a little bit higher true shooting percentage, either way, Booker was doing so much more on the playmaking side. This showed up a lot with KD's field goal stuff. Booker assisted on 30. Booker was assisted on 30% of his twos, while KD was assisted on 51 of them. Booker was assisted on 61% of his threes. KD was 82%. You had mentioned it before the podcast that KD just kind of feels his way into games and scores his points, not necessarily dominating the ball, which is a good thing, but it also means that he's not going to be the guy who had the highest imprint on their offense by himself. If you want to take it, comparing the two when they're off the court, when Devin Booker was on the court and Durant was off, they were +5 with 120.6 net rating. That's really good. That offense is insane, although the defense is maybe bottom 10 in the league. Just playing to that level of offense without Kevin Durant on the floor is ridiculous. That's how impactful Devin Booker was last season. With Kevin Durant on the floor, with Booker off, they were a +2.9 net rating with a 117.8 offensive rating. So slightly worse here. A lot of this is the playmaking stuff. They did not have a backup point guard last season, and their starting point guard had to be Devin Booker. He was by far the best passer out of Booker, Beal, and Durant. And honestly, he did take a step forward last season. When Booker would go to the bench, it was often Kevin Durant having to play a point guard type role for them last season, which not ideal because that's not necessarily his game. Another note I have to say about Durant, it's a lot harder for him to generate assists. The reason of this, as he's gotten older, he doesn't get to the rim that much, right? Some of that has to do with him being such a great mid-range shooter. I think he shot 52% from mid-range last season, which is ridiculous, right? That was third in the league, I think, behind Middleton, somebody
DeMar?
else. Maybe. It might
DeMar
have been
definitely had enough attempts. I don't know if he made it.
He was top 10. DeMar was definitely
I'll
top
look
10.
it up. I'll look it up while you talk.
Yeah. Middleton was 1, Durant was 3. Either way, Durant's taking a lot of those because he can settle for them because he makes them so much. It makes it a lot harder for him to create looks for his teammates because a lot of the easiest way to create looks for teammates is getting to the rim. Durant really, since his Achilles tear, hasn't gotten to the rim as much as he used to, especially in OKC. He was a monster getting to the rim at OKC, even though his efficiency at the rim is still very solid. And Booker also just has a lot better of a handle. I think it goes a little overstated. Durant's handle, honestly, has never been that strong. It's just, you don't worry about the handle. You have Kevin Durant in front of you. You can't contest that jump shot. As he's gotten older, it's a little easier to exploit his lack of handle because he's not as quick as he used to be. Other than that, that's the key reason why Booker was more valuable for them on defense, or a lot more valuable for them on offense. Generally, Durant was better for them on defense, not by a ton. I'll just pull up these notes that I made on their defense. Like I said, the main driver for their defense was Kevin Durant.
You mean
Nurkic? Nurkic. It got even better with Kevin Durant. Okay, it seems like my notes have been gone. Either way, without Nurkic, their defensive rating with Kevin Durant on the floor, Booker off, was just over 115 or just under 115 when Nurkic was out there. They're right here. I'm being ridiculous. So yeah, with plus 14 net rating with Booker and Nurkic on, KD off, 114.3 defensive rating. That's pretty solid. And then with Durant and Nurkic, they were plus 11.6 with a 110 defensive rating. So as you can tell, 110 is pretty solid. That would have been close to top 10 in the league last season. Or it would have even been top 10 in the league last season. Kevin Durant plus Nurkic. This is without Booker. I think some of that is because they're putting a better defensive player out there in place of Booker. But either way, Durant was a typically more positive defender for them than Booker last season. Going forward, projecting based off of what they did, we have to think that their offense would be better without Booker next season, just because of the Tyus Jones addition. Like, they won't be better without Booker, but their offense with Booker.
When Booker's off the court, okay.
This
I was like, what the fuck happened to Booker? I was like, what happened to Booker?
And hopefully for them, they can get USA Div Booker. Or at least more of that, because he was great in the Olympics on defense. He was kind of 6'5" Klay Thompson in the Olympics last season. Yeah, any other notes that you want to make here before we shift forward to some lineups, even some individual players, if you have individual players you want to talk about for them?
I mean, no, that was just a lot of info to take in. I'm trying to still, but it's very interesting. Yeah, it was just, I'm sorry. It was just a bunch of shit. So
yeah,
it's very interesting just to see how impactful just Booker is for this team, and that, like we said, that Kevin Durant just kind of settles, and he still averages 27 points a game. Like, we're saying he settles in the games, and he's still averaging 27. So, I mean, yes, Booker is this offense, but Kevin Durant is, not no schmo. Like,
and this has happened with Kevin Durant in the past. Steph Curry was really, if you argue that Steph Curry wasn't the engine of the Warriors when Kevin Durant was there, like, you're just lying. When in Brooklyn, they just looked so much better once Harden got there. Durant himself, generally, you would want another guard around them, and then your offense is unstoppable. Even in OKC with Westbrook, it was a little bit better with Westbrook, even though it wasn't as impactful back then, because Durant was a little bit better of a self-creator back then than he was even in Brooklyn. He was probably a little bit better of a creator in OKC. Another bit of things, a lot of people really like their individual players, because they're very popular. They're top 3 guys.
Like Bol. Oh, wait. Sorry. I thought we were transitioning to something else.
No, Beal, Booker, Durant, they were plus 7.2 when all 3 of them played last season. 40 games, 840 minutes. That's very good stuff. And then when it was just Devin Booker and Durant, they were plus 6.3. When it was Devin Booker and Beal, it was 6.2. And then when it was Durant and Bradley Beal, it was 3.8. So again, generally it's a little bit stronger when Booker's out there. When it's just Durant and Beal, it doesn't even hold up as well. A lot of that's just, Booker's a better passer than Beal. So when he's lead initiator, when you have a lead initiator, you want it to be Booker between those guys. A lot of the questions I had about this fit really settled. At least on offense, I think the fit looked perfectly fine. I'm a little bit concerned on what that means for them building a defense around that offense, if that makes any sense. Like, still having these guys take up 107%. I think your offense will be great. I don't think there's really that much of an adjusted period because they're all that great on offense. It's hard for them to struggle. But it's hard to then fill out a good roster that makes up a good defense around them, considering the budgetary restraints.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I think they're
They've done a good job. I agree.
yeah, I think yeah, like people like Josh Okogie, Royce O'Neal.
Yeah. I think I actually forgot to mention the Grayson Allen extension. Um, it might have happened in season, which is why it didn't pop up for me. His number was 70 over 4, which is 11% of the cap. Solid contract, about 11 million per season, or 15 million per season. That's Grayson Allen. He shot the ball really well last season. Yeah. Going forward to lineups for them. The
Worst person,
around him.
worst character, but he can shoot the ball and he's pretty good at basketball. But like as a person, terrible person. But
Yeah.
He did. He really did have a good season this year. I mean, he was like he was a bright spot. Like off that. I mean, he started a bunch of games for him. He shot 46% from the 3-point line. Like, it's crazy.
He was great. Like, he was one of the better shooters in the league last year. Certainly. We'll now move forward to lineups for them. What do we think their lineups are going to be like? Just like the Lakers episode, last episode, we kind of know their starting point guard. Really, their starting lineup has to be Jones, Booker, Beal, Durant, and Nurkic, because they signed Tyus Jones. The reason they got him is because they promised that he would start.
Yeah. I think if that wasn't that caveat, my lineup would look different, but that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, and it's not that I don't like that. It's just maybe you try to split Booker and Jones a ton.
Yeah, it would be nice to have Tyus Jones come off the bench and lead that second unit.
Yeah,
but
maybe it's a thing where Booker comes off the court first, then he's leading the second unit, doing that. I would hope.
Yeah, but I think they do want to get Tyus Jones in that starting lineup because just kind of relieve some of the pressure of Devin Booker being even though we know that he can handle it, and he's proven that he can handle it. It's still nice to get that pressure off, and that's the only reason they got him to go there. So
you also think that he can take more of that load onto defense instead, because he honestly, like, it doesn't show up in the NBA as much as I really think it could have. As a prospect, he was an interesting defensive player, and then like he shows flashes of being a good defender. I think in their finals run, he like really looked like a good defender, like straight up, not just in comparison to the rest of their roster. Like, he was no slouch. With how much he's had to do on offense, it just hasn't shown up for the Suns the past couple years. And I think if you're getting more Devin Booker defensively, and then that improved passing ability will still show up, right? It'll just be coming off of shots or advantages created by Tyus Jones a little bit more than always
exactly.
Devin Booker being on ball.
Yep.
Hopefully that will help their offense. Even they might have the best offense in the league next season if Tyus Jones is operating stuff for them. And these guys are healthy. That's always the caveat with every team. And every team that we say like that, obviously.
Yep.
Bench lineups are interesting. Like we said, we really like the idea of splitting Tyus and Devin Booker. Not likely that they'll do that. Bench center, do we have Kaminsky, Plumlee, or Bol Bol?
We got Plumlee.
We got
Plumlee, Bol Bol, Kaminsky.
Yeah, I think
that's
so.
how I see it.
Plumlee's a really good roller at this point.
Yeah.
That's really all you get out of those guys. Plumlee, high energy too. I think people will like Plumlee for them. Bench wings. This is where it gets really interesting. What do we have? Obviously,
I like
Grayson.
O'Neal. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, Grayson Allen. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, Grayson Allen first off the bench. I like Royce O'Neal over Okogie coming off next.
yeah. Do we think that because they have Booker and Tyus, that they will scrap Monte Morris, or do we think they'll still play Monte Morris minutes?
Damn, it's really hard to find him minutes. I'm like, cause but nah, but I think if they run Tyus Jones and Devin Booker, yeah, Monte Morris is gonna get minutes. At least
I agree.
he's got to get
Because
minutes. Yeah,
it's still a passer out there for you, and he like I'm not sure what his 3-point numbers were last season, but Monte Morris typically has
it
been able to shoot
was
the ball pretty well.
42%.
Yeah, that's perfect, right?
Really good.
In Minnesota, he had a pretty strong on-court impact last season in Minnesota, while Conley didn't really have one. Um, so typically, it's looking like he's still a pretty solid NBA player. Um, that's
Also,
just you got
sorry. Yeah,
you got it.
also Monte Morris is another guy that's really good at taking care of the ball. I think his turnover last year was under point 0.5 and it's been under 1 his whole career. So he's another guy just like Tyus Jones that knows how to take care of the ball. Even if his assist numbers aren't like 5, 6, he will take care of the ball.
Yeah, and then like to put it into context of like per 36, because this will scale up the fact that they don't play that much. For his career, he's at 5.6 assists to 1.1 turnovers, which is like some great stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's great.
Wow.
They didn't have a backup guard last season, like whatsoever, and it hurt them a lot. It really hurts their offense. So having these guys there, I think, should really grease the wheels of their offense. And then you had mentioned Royce. Royce and Grayson, I think, should make up the rest of their bench minutes. What do we think?
Do you think Okogie gets no minutes this year?
No, I think as a defensive specialist, and realistically, Booker, Beal, Durant, somebody's getting hurt.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, this season, I think this team is more slanted to have players similar to Booker and Beal, so those injuries might not hurt you, or might not hurt you as
Yeah.
much as the Durant injury would. Versus last year, it was more slanted to Durant, but it really wasn't slanted. Like it really wasn't, but it was a little bit more. Yeah, I think with Jones, Morris, Grayson Allen, with Monte Morris, Grayson Allen, and Royce O'Neal, and Plumlee getting backup center minutes, I think that should do most of the regular season rotation. Okogie will probably play in defensive situations a lot, or if they really need a guy off the bench to defend that game, then it would be him. Or if they wanted to go 10, he's the next guy, I would think. Year to year, this is a lot more depth than they've had in the past. Not to mention they might get stuff out of rookies, Iguodaro and Dunn. So, yeah, I mean that was a very quick lineup section, I think, because their starting lineups been gift wrapped to us.
Yep.
Going forward to predictions, offensive MVP, defensive MVP predictions, or X Factor. Offensive
Yeah.
MVP for them next season.
I'm gonna go Devin Booker again.
Yeah.
I think for all the reasons that you mentioned, with just the impact he brings, the assist numbers. I mean, he basically averaged 7 assists last year at 6.9, and he also dropped 27 points per game. So, and he can. I mean, he's Devin Booker. He's an elite scorer. I think he's the offensive player for them.
Yeah. And then like even though like they did bring in the guys in Jones and Morris, there's still going to be situations where to close out games it might be Royce O'Neal, right? and Booker then still has to do a lot of that stuff that he had to do last season. Now, for them last year, he had to do it all the time. This year, he doesn't have to do it all the time. He just has to do it when they need him to do it. And I think to close out games, that's when it's going to be most felt, or most those duties are going to be relied on Booker more at the end of games, so they can have some defensive matchups at the end of the game. I have Booker as well, is basically what I'm trying to get at, even though they're going to be a very offensively talented team next year. Defensive MVP, it's going to be Nurkic, just for the sure fact that they don't have a lot of great individual defenders, and their center depth isn't very good, so he's their best defensive center by far. Yeah, that's the Nurkic argument.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, it's he has good hands too. Really interesting steal.
Oh,
good steal numbers for a center.
yeah.
Um,
They're like 1.1. He averaged the same amount of blocks as steals.
Yeah, and again, that's his vertical. He's not very vertically adept, but he's still big as hell around the rim.
Oh yeah.
Very strong as well. Will stop you in the post. And then X factor for them, I don't know.
I got one.
Okay, I'll hear it.
I think it's Bradley Beal and Bradley Beal's health in general. He only played 53 games for him last year. This is a guy that they traded for, and he didn't really get to have a huge impact. I think that when he gets a full season with this team, it's going to be very interesting. And especially with Tyus Jones, I think that Bradley Beal, he came into the NBA being a three-point shooter. He shot 43% last year. I think that he's going to be really good. And that he's going to fit into the third scorer role really well. And I mean, I think this is a guy that can average you 22 a game, along with Beal and Booker and Durant going for 26 plus.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a good season for Beal. I hope. Right, 43% is really good last season. That should help him at least play off ball around those guys. We mentioned it a little bit in the Mavericks episode. It's really hard for guys in this third role against other ball-dominant guys to put up points. Specifically, I was referring to Klay Thompson. We'll see. I don't know how high the individual scoring is going to be, but I'm really interested to see if the three-point numbers stay higher. And honestly, if there is a way for him to increase his points per game, it's going to be taking more threes, because Booker and Durant don't take a ton of threes themselves. If Beal can increase his volume and maybe, stray away from some of the mid-range stuff, I think that could really help their offense next season. And think about it this way. Adding Tyus Jones to their starting lineup, he's going to take over a lot of the ball handling duties that Booker was doing last year. That means Booker will go into some of the Beal ball handling. Maybe Beal fills into that Tyus Jones role where he's really just taking a ton of threes. Or not Tyus Jones, Grayson Allen role. Other than that, I don't really have an X factor for them. I think Bradley Beal's a good one, so I'll go with that as well.
Yeah, and just real quick, this that 43% is the highest in his career, and it was on a not necessarily crazy low amount. It was 200 attempts, but he has been able to shot in his career. He has shot upwards of like 500 threes and has shot 40% from there. So I think that it'd be really nice for him to become kind of what he was in Washington when he first came in, when John Wall was running the show, kind of like a 3-point sniper. I think it can happen. I think he can maintain these 3-point numbers, and hopefully they increase as well, the efficiency numbers.
Yeah, so one other thing on that is back in Washington around Wall, Beal averaged about 4 attempts a game, which is about in line with what he did this season with similar efficiency numbers. Back when he really averaged a ton of points in Washington without John Wall, he jacked up his 3-point attempt rates mainly with pull-up threes. Once he got to Phoenix this year, he kind of cuts out a lot of those pull-up three attempts and doesn't increase the catch and shoot volume as much as you would have hoped. Hopefully he can increase that catch and shoot volume a little bit more. I think some of that is he's used to catching the ball and creating, continuing the advantage versus maybe now it's probably best for him to catch and shoot a lot.
Yep, I agree 100%.
And hopefully this season with more playmakers like Morris and Tyus Jones, there's a lot more of those attempts versus a lot of the time last year. It would be a lot harder for some of their passers to find him in those situations. Maybe the pass would be a little bit offline and the defender could close out a little bit harder or with more time. Stuff like that. I think that should overall improve his volume this season because this is the best offensive team he's ever played on, even better than those mid-2010s Wizards teams. He should get so many more easier looks than he got on those teams.
Yeah.
Hopefully he gets up to like 6 is what I would hope. 6 a game.
Let's see. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I mean, last time. Yeah. That I'd like. Yeah. I think if he shoots 6 a game and he sits around 40%, I mean, that's just incredible, and I think he can do it.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely that quality of a shooter. He had to take so many bad shots in Washington for so long.
Yep.
That'll basically do it for this predictions part. Overall, though, let's grade their offseason. How do we feel? Better, worse, stay the same? What do we think?
I think they got better. They addressed a big issue with the they didn't have a true backup point guard. Now they have 2 backup point guards. So I mean, they did a really good job in that aspect. They brought in, I think, a better center than the one they ended up losing. And I think that the Tyus Jones and Monte Morris signing to make up for Eric Gordon's loss. So I think they did get better, and they did a really good job this offseason. And I think I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'll guarantee it that they will have a better record than last season. And
I agree.
At least top 4 seed.
I doubt they can have as bad of health as they had last season. Think about it this way. Bradley Beal is now filling into the Grayson Allen. Grayson Allen is now filling into the Eric Gordon role. Royce O'Neal is now filling into the Bol, Keita Bates-Diop, Okogie role. Like you said, Plumlee, I would agree, is better than Eubanks by a little bit. And then they didn't even have a backup point guard last year, so Morris is instantly better than what they had last year. So, overall, I agree. They definitely got better. I'll see where we rank them, but this should be a good season for Phoenix, much better than last season. You got any final comments before we finish this one up?
Man, Bradley Beal, good luck. As a Wizards fan, we're rooting for you. That's all I gotta say.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode. Following this episode in 2 days, obviously, we'll have the Sacramento Kings episode, and then we will have the entire Western Conference predictions episode. That should be a fun one. We will see all then.